What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of White Belt MMA podcast. And my guest today, I'm honored to have him on the show, is Kurtzy from the Comments from the Peanut Gallery podcast. And he's also the co-host of, let me get this right. I want to make sure I'm getting this right? Co-host of the MMA Plug 303, sponsored by Denver Sports Morning on Mile High Sports Radio. And he also does a lot of stuff for Factory X. And my man, how you doing?
I'm doing great, man. It's great to be on here. Thank you very much for having me on the show.
Yeah, definitely, man. I've told you this before. We first time we spoke was on the Speakeasy Sports Channel. We were doing that award show, and then you kind of spoke about how you were doing stuff with Factory X and like a bunch of cool stuff that you were doing with them. But like in a way, I feel like your story it started the same way most of everyone that's on like Instagram or they're trying to get like their content creation up is you're a fan of the sport. You're a fan of the sport of MMA, just like me, just like Easy, just like Dapper Media, like we were just talking about. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us how you got into the whole mixed martial arts. Like what made you become a fan, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, well, so I've been a fan for for a long time. I wrestled when I was a kid. I mean, I played about every sport imaginable when I was young. But I just always loved wrestling for the one-on-one aspect. And one of the big drawing in moments for me, or one of the very first big time hooks, because I was a wrestler. I like to watch Matt Hughes. But then that fight that Matt Hughes had against Frank Trigg, where it was Matt Hughes Frank Trigg too, where Matt Hughes was able to battle through he got kicked in the dick and referee didn't see it, almost gets finished. There was a lot of beef and shit talking before that fight, and that was really kind of something that was uncharacteristic for Matt Hughes. But then he is able to break through the rear naked choke, picks him up, runs him all the way across the cage and slams him. Like, that's one of the most electrifying moments in MMA history. Like, it still lives on through the highlights and the opening reels that get played today for events. And it was just kind of surreal because I talked to Frank Trigg on my radio show just a couple of weeks ago, and he talked about that. He's just like, man, like they pretty much let go of every other highlight from the history of like those years of the sport, except for me getting slammed. And so it was
Yeah.
kind of surreal, getting to talk to Frank Trigg about that like actual moment. But yeah, so I like to say I've been a fan for a long time. But what really kind of got me into when I first started doing the Peanut Gallery podcast and that whole project, I was talking about a lot of pretty much every sport. But then really, I mean, MMA has been the passion, and that's where I really kind of had the most love in terms of the audience. And I feel like to a certain extent, when I started doing it, it's also based off of market saturation. You start talking about football or some of the other major sports, there, some dude doing a podcast like that's a dime a dozen as far as that
Yep.
sort of content goes. But someone who was able to speak to the martial arts world or speak to the fight game the way that I've been able to, and I know leaps and bounds more now. And I mean, and in knowing that I know that much more now, I realize how little I really still true duly know. Like, I thought that I knew a lot about the fight game back then, but after spending every single day in it for now basically 3 years, pretty much every single day been entrenched into the mixed martial arts world, I realized that the more that I learn, the more that I just have no clue. Like, there's guys out there that have, and there are people that you will never even know what their name is. But there's guys who are in the gyms who are instructors, or guys who are just, traveling martial artists who they're just they're just unreal as far as we have a saying at the gym to chop wood and to carry water. Like, the way that these guys just day in day out are consistent with their training, with their practice, like that's what keeps everything right in the rest of their life. So like I say, like that was something that really drew me in. And then through just life's travels, tragedies, tribulations, all those sorts of things, Factory X really kind of drew or brought me in as family. And I've been a part of the team. I've been the lead guy as far as media and content for a couple of years now, and I have a great relationship with the coaching staff. I mean, Coach Mark Montoya has changed my life. I absolutely love the Montoya family. They've treated me like family basically for the very beginning. I mean, from the start, when I first started coming around, coach could have very well said, like, who the fuck is this kid that's coming in and, like, taking pictures and videos in my gym, like during my practices. But me and coach have always hit it off and had a great relationship. And, so much to the fact that we've traveled the country together. Like we've been through a lot of a lot of crazy adversity through the last couple of years too, like being able to figure out how to handle things on the media side, how to, when the pandemic hit, well, how can we still get content out to the students of the gym? Like, when you're talking about operating a gym and being the owner, like the way the coach Mark is, he's
Mhm.
also got to think about his entire membership base, not just the team. So, I mean, we were able to grow through that tragedy together by putting out an entire digital library of some curriculum as far as the classes go for a few weeks during that. So, I mean, we're tight. Like I absolutely love Factory X. I'm, X on the chest. I bleed black and white through and through. And from there, everything just kind of blossomed. That created the relationship with Landau Performance, which, if you're not familiar with what Landau Performance is, it's one of the top athletic performance centers in the country. Lauren Landau, who is also the strength and conditioning coach for the Broncos, he's got an incredible staff here in Denver, and they do the strength and conditioning for the majority of the athletes that you see coming out of the Denver area, and whether that's Factory X to Elevation to 303 Genesis, obviously the Broncos, and then they always have their off season, NFL groups, combine prep, all that sort of stuff. So
Mhm.
it's been an amazing thing to just continue to build itself up amongst all the different projects that I've been involved with.
I see it, man. And let me ask you this, man. So, comments of the peanut gallery. That's a really creative name. So, one, tell me, how'd you come up with the name? And then, what made you want to stick with it? Because, I know there's some content creators that, they start off with a name and then after a while they start to get a little bit big and then they're like, let me change it, just change it just a little tad bit, just so like it's not as, whatever they're going through in their thought process. So, yeah, so tell me, what made you want to come up with the name of Comments from the Peanut Gallery and what made you want to stick with it?
Well, so essentially, like where that saying kind of comes from is based off of the people in the cheap seats, and like, I represent for that crowd. That I've always had the gift of gab.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, whether it's being able to talk and speak in an academic sense, I could do that if need be. I mean, that's just not naturally me. So when, we're talking and we're roasting or busting balls back and forth, it's going to be a little bit more, raw and rough around the edges, because that's just how I am, or who I am.
Mm-hmm.
But I've, I'm usually not one to be short with something to say. And so, it would always just be that whole sort of thing, like, hey, we don't need any comments from the peanut gallery over there.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, that just was always kind of the but then, once I started being able to actually like have a platform or being able to speak within this sort of space, it just, I don't know, it was a name that kind of stood out. And then with having a pretty catchy logo to go along with it, that just has kind of, that was really also something that is the logo was so catchy that took off with a lot of people, and was something that, I'm recognized for with that by itself. So, once you have a little bit of awareness and brand recognition out there in the space, it's, then it's obvious that something worked in the early
Mm-hmm.
stages for people to kind of gravitate or recognize you from there. Certain circles all going on, they'll call me Peanut, because I'm sure, like, like, it's not that they don't, or they're trying to not know my name or anything, but they'll know it from, based off of the watermark in the photos, or from the podcast or the video work or anything along those lines. It just, I thought that from a very early stage of it, that having some sort of branding angle was going to be something that would help set me apart from some of my contemporaries. There's a lot of people that are out there that produce great content,
Mm-hmm.
and it's no slight to any of them at all. But what separates you from X, Y, and Z, in terms of why should I come to your channel, or why should I follow you specifically for these sort of things?
Yeah.
And I don't know, I just felt like I'm having some sort of brand was the right move, and I think it's paid off in the long run.
See, and like that's really interesting too, because the thing is, like your mindset, it's like from what I'm like, feeling that type of vibe from you is that you're a really calculated guy. So like, was it one of those things that you just always been that type of guy that you always make sure you plan out your steps right ahead, or is it one of those things that you went to school for media and then you're just putting that into play now? So yeah, so like I said, it's like did you go to school for it, or was it like you're just like and whatever you do, you're calculated. You like to plan everything step by step.
I'm definitely hyper analytical, but
Mhm.
sometimes I'll, if I try to plan too much,
Mhm.
then it'll be, I'll train wreck myself. You know what I mean? Like I'll start getting too anxious about certain things. Like me, did this little thing, go along with this. Whereas like I like to be a lot more like process driven on that, like and
Mhm.
not necessarily task oriented, but what is the overall process? Like one of my coaches, who absolutely love him to death. So if you do ever see this, Coach Caruso, like I love you, man. But so sometimes in jujitsu, like it might be like 6 steps within a sequence, or to finish off a move. And sometimes it's like, fuck, man, like I remember 1 and 2, and then I get a little bit foggy at 3, 4 to sometimes 5, and then I remember what 6 is. He said, sometimes you just got to say fuck 1 through 5 and get to 6.
Mhm.
So, like sometimes it's just a thought of, like it doesn't matter how you get to where you're going as long as you're continuing to work forward and get to there. So
Mhm.
yeah, like I've made a lot of mistakes along the way. I mean, I haven't been afraid or averse to taking risk. And that's kind of bitten me in the ass at times, but it's also paid major dividends in the long run. I got into doing commentary just solely by chance. I showed up to a No Mercy Extreme Fighting card down in Colorado Springs, Colorado, that a few of my teammates were on, and I got there 5 minutes before the show, and they actually one of their commentators was a no-show.
Mhm.
And so the one of the guys who, or the other guy of the broadcast duo that was there, recognized me when I walked through the door, but in part, I was wearing a peanut gallery sweater, and was just, was walking right in, and he said, "Hey, like I know this kid knows the game. I know that, he can speak well. Let's see what he can do with the headset on. Let's see how he reacts in a live setting." And so it was Trevor O'Connor who gave me my first overall opportunity to commentate live fights. And, like I say, I had zero prep time. It was 5 minutes before the show. I could have allowed the adversity of the moment to either consume me, or I could allow it to fuel me. Like, hey, fuck it, let's do it, let's go.
Mhm.
Like you've got some teammates that are out there risking it. Why can't you take a risk tonight? And if you fall on your face, and if you fail, and if this is something that you did not do a good job of, then at least you kick the tire on it. At least that's something that you tried, and that like, man, this really isn't us. But at the same time, I mean, this has always been kind of a passion. This has been like a dream sort of opportunity. If you say no, then what if this opportunity never comes along again? And I think that just with my drive, that it would have at some point, but that was my thought process is, sometimes the window of opportunity is that small,
Yeah.
and you have to be, and that's in any sort of competitive realm, whether that's sports, that's business, that's whatever. Sometimes the window of opportunity is that fucking small, and you have to strike while the iron is hot. And it's the thing, I was offered the opportunity, and I said yes. Well, I did well enough within that to where they asked me back for the next show, and then it just built itself upon that. And then now, as pretty much standing gigs, if you will, I do commentary for 3 different promotions. When Fury Fighting Championship, I've actually done a pay-per-view for them that's on Fight TV. But when they're outside of Texas, when they go westward, I do commentary along with the Hanyak Dustin Jacoby, he's in the UFC. He's a rising guy through the light heavyweight ranks, won big on the Contender Series this last summer. And Colorado Combat Club, that's another local area promotion that showcases a lot of the amateurs and low or early pros, the freshmen and sophomore pros, I like to call them, those guys who are pretty much like 3-0 and below on some of those type of cards.
Mm.
When LFA comes through in the area, well, my radio show co-host is Ron Kruck, who does commentary for LFA, but I do cage side photography for them when they come through. So it's been a wild ride. There's been, I can't say that everything has been calculated, but there's been definitely there's been controlled chaos, I guess, if you will, within it. Like so I guess, yeah, like it has been kind of planned out to say yes, like
Mhm.
say yes to incredible opportunities. And if you don't know how to do it, then fucking figure it out. Like we have a wealth of information at our fingertips. If you don't know how to shoot a certain type of content setting or figure out something that this athlete is asking for, then Google that shit. Like
Yeah.
it's not that hard to figure out like real practical solutions. But I guess like that's really where it comes from. Is I have a background in sales. And so when it comes to trying to figure out like, all right, well, when you're working in sales, you need to know like, how do I get to the end game? How do I close this shit? How do I get to the point to where there's some sort of, transaction element that takes place?
Mhm.
Because if I don't get to that point, then I don't eat.
Yeah.
That's really what it comes down to. Is you got to figure out how do you make the best of the situation to where you can make it sustainable. That's where I feel like it's hard for a lot of other creatives as well. Is you're not willing to give up the comfort and leisure of your existing lifestyle to be able to pursue it in this sport. Because if you think that you're really going to get into it right away and the money's there, it's not.
Yeah.
Like you're going to have to grind for a long time. You're going to have some connections. You're going to have some luck that rolls your way, just like anything out there. But as a whole, because MMA is still just kind of this growing thing that's less than 30 years old from when the UFC was created.
Mhm.
You have to be willing to, at least from my side, the way that I've gotten to where I have, bro, I wouldn't be here if I wasn't willing to sacrifice a lot of comfort in my regular lifestyle.
Yeah.
That you can't, if you want to have all of your weekends, if you want to have all of those extra time, like that's not there. If you're following on the news, if you're being able to come back on that Sunday, Monday and do card recaps and all, because why? There's fights every single weekend.
Yeah.
And especially if you're involved with a team like as big as ours, sometimes, bro, we have guys that are fighting every week for like 6-7 weeks in a row.
Mhm.
And sometimes that could be a local show on a Friday or a Saturday, or that could be somebody's on an LFA card on a Friday night. Then we have somebody who's in the UFC on a Saturday night, or there's whatever could be the case. So it's a never ending thing. There's no off season in MMA either, and that's where I feel
Mhm.
like there's not a lot of people who are willing to stick with that sort of grind.
Yeah.
But I am like I don't know, like I'm a little bit older or more old school with my approach, and some of my mentors in the game are guys like James Krause,
Mhm.
guys like a Dustin Jacoby, guys who they've gone through a tremendous amount of adversity in their own lives, and they're still that OG. They're still that gangster who, if you put it on me for 4 minutes and 59 seconds, you better not let off for that last second, because if you do, then I'm gonna fucking tag you in that 1 second.
Mhm.
So that I just kind of try to always have pace, always have pressure. Coach Mark Montoya challenged us all to have a word for our theme of the year, and mine is relentless. Just
Mhm.
because I want to be relentless with my pace. I want to be pushing forward all the time, because if you continue to keep on knocking on doors, eventually something's going to open.
Mhm.
It's not going to happen just by sitting on your ass and waiting for it to happen.
That you really inspire me for, that I've just been watching your work, is that, like you said, is that constant grind, that constant work ethic. And the thing is I feel like it's one of those things, is like, if you have that, you start to sense that into other people. And like, you're one of like my role models in the game, like right now, from just watching your work.
Appreciate it.
Speak Easy Sports, Easy's another one, right? The fact that he started this back in, like, what was it, like early March or something like that, and then to the point that he is now getting big interviews in MMA. He even got Darius Slay, from was it from the Eagles, on his podcast. So it's just like, the fact that you guys are just keep on grinding, keep having that work ethic. And one thing that it's pretty cool, that like you said, is like the fact that you actually train with the team, dude. So like, dude, tell me about that. So first time you walked into the gym and like, you went onto those mats and like you said, you did wrestling in high school. So was it one of those things that you're like, okay, I kind of have the feel for this, I wrestled in high school. I think I should transition pretty well. Or was it, just like everyone else that does it on their first day that, it feels like a truck just hit them and you're just there like, what the hell was that? Like, I need to get better at this. Yeah.
So it's a crazy story how I got back into training itself. And I stopped wrestling when I was 15, so I didn't wrestle all the way through high school or anything like that.
Mhm.
But and it was just because of I had moved on to specializing through baseball, and I didn't want to have to be cut. Baseball was my top sport growing up as far as what I played, so
Mhm.
I didn't want to always be cutting weight and being at my weakest point coming into the season for my strongest sport,
Mhm.
if that makes sense, just by
No,
the way
yeah.
that, like, in Colorado, the way the high school season sequenced.
Mhm.
But yeah, like that's how I ended up in that long run. But the way that I got into training was it was an immediate grudge match, like right away, the very first time, right away out of the chute. It was I had a grappling match in the back of UFC 241, and at the hotel in the training rooms. Like, bro, I shit you not, we weighed in on scales in front of UFC officials. We had ring card girls. We had like 35, 40 people in the room. Like, it was absolutely insane. Like, we did more, like, we had a bigger audience between like the couple of guys that were in the UFC that were like live streaming on Instagram than some of these like local shows get, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But so Coach absolutely hates my long hair. Coach Mark fucking hates it. And so that morning, we're getting to the training area at the hotel, and it's the Friday before, or it's the Friday of weight cuts.
Mhm.
And so we're getting there early to start having a shakeout, start getting the sweat going, and these guys are gonna go weigh in. But so obviously, Ian and Devontae, they can't really, they don't need to worry about the coffee or any of that sort of shit. But I was waiting for some coffee. Me and Coach were waiting for coffee, and the coffee was late getting down there. Usually, it gets there around like 6, but it was already like 6:20, and the coffee hadn't came. And so then the guy finally starts coming with the cart, and then just the worst attitude in the world. And I was like, "Oh, the coffee's here," and the guy just, "Yeah, not for you." Like, what the hell do you mean not for me? And then
Mhm.
Coach just looks at me like, and just dead ass, just dead stare right at me. Think it's because of your hair, bro? Like, what are you talking about, Coach? Like,
Uh,
you think he was pissed off because of your hair? Like, what are you talking about? Like, well, I mean, it's long. It just was just like shit talking to me right there. I mean, and like I say, for someone who normally is pretty witty and can talk back, one, Coach Marsh scares the shit out of me, and I wouldn't like go too crazy going ham and like firing back.
I mean, he does
But
have a mean death stare. Just even in those pictures, those photo shoots he does for the UFC. I'm over here. I'm like, man, I even get scared looking at it. To be honest, I'm intimidated. So yeah.
oh yeah, but it's 6:30 in the morning, and so I'm not, I'm still trying to wake up. I'm still trying to get fired on all cylinders here, and so that just it kind of dies down for a little bit, and then he's like, what would you do to cut it? Like, what would it be? Like, if there was like you know a valid wager or something that was worth putting it on the line for, I would consider it. But aside from that, like, no, like I'm not gonna do it just to do it. Like that was just more so that was what the message was. And then we get to breakfast after weigh-ins, and then one of the other guys sitting at the table, a guy named Nate Cups, who he had been training for. I mean, he's trained for longer than I have.
Mm.
And coach just looks up and down the table, and he just looks at Nate, and he goes, "I've got it. You and you, 5-minute grappling match, submission grappling match
True.
for your hair."
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, well, "What the fuck? Like, what does he not get?" He's like, "Well, because we were going to be having a barber that was coming over to the Airbnb later in the afternoon to line up all the guys before TV weigh-ins and all that sort of shit, and
Mhm.
Nate would be getting a haircut there." And he's like, "Well, he doesn't get to get his hair, but his hair's already cut. He's just be getting fucking lined up. Like, this is bullshit." Like, so yeah, and then after a minute, then I just started thinking, and I knew that if I didn't, that coach would just think that I was the biggest bitch in the world.
Mhm.
And so, like, yeah, fuck it, like, let's do it. Like, I'm not scared. Like, He wants that smoke, I'll give it to him.
Uh,
And so then, sure as shit, after breakfast, we go down, we stripped down to the undies basically, and we got after it in the Hilton Anaheim out there for UFC 241. That was my introduction into a formal setting of submission grappling.
uh.
And then, I mean, as you can see, I mean, my hair's still here.
All right, so
And from that point,
we can interfere that you ended up winning that match, correct? So, like you said, since the hair's still here.
there was some controversy.
Oh,
I
okay.
will say that much. So where the controversy came in was how you interpreted a takedown. If you gave if you know how jujitsu is scored,
Mm-hmm.
it can be very subjective.
Yep.
Some people will score, like they'll say like, oh well, if you kind of pulled guard in the process of takedown, well, you're not going to get that takedown.
Mm-hmm.
Well, me coming from a wrestling background, like, no, bitch, we went from being on the ground and your hips are on the ground. I'm over the top of you. Like, that's fucking takedown.
Mm-hmm.
And so it got ruled a draw officially. So nobody, they gave us the nice guy sort of like, want to kiss your sister sort of ruling. But
Kind of like the Mike
yeah,
Tyson Roe
I
Jones draw. They were like, yeah, everybody wins, so it's a draw.
Yeah, I mean, I had a feeling that one was going to go that way before it even happened. Like they had two belts already like on display prior to it, so I don't know. I felt it, but yes, exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
That of like, well, I don't want anybody to get too hurt or get their feelings. But yeah, so as far as I'm concerned, I fucking won that match, and any other time like it's been floated out there like, well, there may be the rematch any fucking day of the week we can get it. That's just always been my thought process to it. But yeah, having long hair while training does suck. It's a pain in the ass, and I've debated on cutting it many a times, but it just hasn't happened.
I got you. So I'm guessing, like you said, so from there on, you were just like, I'm full on training with the team from that point on, like you said.
Oh yeah. I mean, I've done multiple tournaments now at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, jujitsu is just it's a huge thing for me. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I love the sport. It's something that has, I don't know, I feel like it's made me a better person. And it also, because I'm a hyper analytical thinker,
Yeah.
it really kind of helps. It helps speak to my active brain. You know what I mean? Because it's such a constant puzzle piece, and I have such great people to learn from. Professor Busy to Professor Brandon Royval to Professor Scott Miller, some of our black belts, and then all the way down to Austin Jones, to your Jordan Titonis of the world. Like they're all incredible within their different styles of teaching, and it's an incredible place to be, man. Like my office and my studio where I do everything at is literally like 5 feet off of the mat. Like you take 2 steps in and you're taking your shoes off, taking your slides off, and stepping onto the mat.
Mm.
So I mean, I'm just in an incredible position with the team, and I I couldn't complain about any part of my relationship there, and I love every bit of every day being able to spend around the team and with coaches.
My man, you're living the dream, man. Like you're living every MMA fans or anyone that practice mixed martial arts in general's dream. You know what I mean? Like you said, talking to fighters, being, training with training from high quality fighters in the UFC or other promotions. So my question is now is, what's the end goal, my man? So is it one of those things that you just want to, get, Factory X to the very top in terms of media, like the way with the AKA, what they're trying to do with their media content, you know what I mean, with like weekly vlogs and all that? Or, for you, is it one of those things that, you want to get to the point that who knows, maybe you end up being on network television, in terms of ESPN and get to like the Errol Hawani's or the Brother Motors, or at this point you're like, I'm my own brand and I want to make it as big as, as I want.
Kind of a hybrid of everything, to
Yeah.
be honest. Like I feel like I personally bring a unique flavor to the pot that
Mm,
nobody else can wear as many hats as I can.
mm,
You want me behind the camera and doing, production and editing? I can do that. You
mm,
want to put me in front of the camera to do interviews? I can do that. You want to put me in front of the camera to do analysis and breakdowns and things of that nature, I can do that too. You want me to do something in a live format, in a broadcast setting, and following those particular set of guidelines and rules that are thought of as the business, I can do that as well. You want
Mhm.
to put me with the headset on and put me cage side and make me commentate on live action, something that, I mean, a lot of people can say it, or you're sitting there while you're watching it from the TV and you're like, "Oh yeah, put the headset on." It's a lot different when you're actually having to be the one responsible for it right there live in the moment. But my record is tried and true with that. You
Mhm.
want to put me in the aspect to write and to, to put pen to paper, or fingers to keyboard on typing columns and that sort of thing. I can do that as well. I just don't want to be a straight up 100% quote unquote reporter.
Mhm.
And I just say it from that standpoint of, I have operated in that role before, but you have to be unbiased, you have to be balanced, you have to be all these different things that abide by the journalistic code of ethics. And I'm much better suited as being someone who can shoot from the hip and give my hot takes, to give my analysis, to present what my thought process is on something. That's
Mhm.
where I feel like I'm much better suited, as opposed to having to be this objective guy who can't really weigh in with their opinions, or can't use their creativity with the wordplay, with the analogies, with all the different references that I feel like that makes my content me, if that makes sense.
No, yeah, I feel it.
And then like judging, like shit, I get to sit there every single Friday and I judge sparring at the gym. Like coach has asked me to be in that position, which I feel like, for him to trust my opinion enough to weigh in for that sort of process within his programming, says something alone by itself. But I also know that if need be, or if that is something that is ever out there, I can do that shit too. So almost everything that is involved within this space, I've now had some sort of experience in. And I just don't feel like there's that many people out there who have so many different options that can be just such a utility knife.
Mhm.
I'll be the first to admit there's people out there who do higher quality production work, or who will have, some cleaner or more crisp photos to this and that. There's people who will do that,
Mhm.
but how many are going to be doing all of these different things that are involved on so many different platforms, whether it's me with the radio show, to the podcast, to the Road to docu-series, which I've got uh three, for sure, three in the works right now, with Devontae Smith, Jonathan Martinez, Vince Cachero. I've done multiple of those in the past with guys like Ian Heinisch, Chris Gutierrez, Austin Jones, Georgie Martinez, Yusuf Zalal's, Brandon Royval's of the world. I've had a pretty decorated resume with those already,
Mhm.
and that's only going to continue to grow. I've had cooking shows that I've done with guys like Devontae Smith that we got all the way to the point of being sponsored, and then that's when he ran into his Achilles injury. So obviously, when the start of the show was no longer able to operate, things kind of change, and we're gonna work on bringing that back. But goal number one right now for Devontae is taking care of business next month in February and getting that W for his comeback fight.
Mhm.
So that's where, it's a level of relationship too, man. Like there's a lot of people out there who don't have the connections, or like the true boots on the ground, if you will, that I've had through the years. Like it's not like I'm new to this game now anymore, bro. Like I've been doing this for years,
Mhm.
and I've been around some of the who's who. Like I've traveled the country doing this shit.
Mhm.
I've slept on airport floors in the middle of the night, just because it didn't make sense to pay for a couple of hours for a hotel while you're trying to catch a red eye to make these different cities and to cover these different events. Like every little thing that people talk about of literally going all the fuck in, I have done.
Mhm.
And so I know that if in the long run, if something doesn't ever work out, or I never really pop to that next level, I know that I at least did everything that I could to put myself in the position to do so. And I don't think that that's the case. Like, I mean, I think that it's only a matter of time before I just keep on leveling up to these different opportunities. Corona, I think, really and truly, that was something that it hurt me immensely, but it's also helped me a lot.
Mhm.
It hurt me in the sense that I haven't been able to do live commentary since last February
Mhm.
because all the shows in all of this area, they just haven't been able to go on. We have a very liberal governor here in Colorado who will not open up the doors. Local promotions cannot survive, cannot put on events if you can't have a live gate. If you can't have those fans that are coming in, paying for tickets, that are buying concessions and merchandise sales, you flat out, you can't survive. You can't put shows on.
Mhm.
And so because of that, I haven't had the opportunity to keep on building up my reel and sharpening up that aspect. I'll always be able to talk fights,
Mhm.
but being you know exactly what I'm saying. Getting those live reps, continuing to just drill through it in a live setting, so that once that next call comes, you don't have any rust. You don't have any sort of ring rust.
Yeah.
There was the potential of possibly hopping on and doing LFA last week, but that was until Laura Sanko decided that, oh yeah, you know, that she's willing to do it. Well, totally understand. Like I mean, there's no job that I could possibly get that she wouldn't beat me out for if she wanted it. She is one of the best in the game, period,
Mhm.
much less
Definitely.
the best female on the mic in the game, and she deserves a spot to commentate in the UFC. Alan Joban is extremely underrated too. I was just hoping that with it being a 2 day notice sort of situation, that there might have been a lot of people, especially those that have families and whatnot, that couldn't have swung it.
Mhm.
But again, if that opportunity was there, I was ready to seize the moment and jump on that opportunity right then and there. But you know, I look at it from like the Jocko perspective. I don't know if you follow Jocko
Oh
Willink at
yeah, yeah.
all, or if you
The
know who
bees. Yeah,
Jocko
yeah,
is.
yeah.
But yeah, he has this video that's called Good, to where he talks about, you know, like if you don't get an opportunity, or you fall short, or you take a loss, good. That's just more time for you to prepare for when the next opportunity comes around. And that's the way that I'm trying to look at it. Like hey, I didn't have it, and in my opinion, I didn't have a chance once those bigger names came into play. But the fact that I was even floated along, the fact that Ed Suarez even knows who I am,
Mhm.
is, I feel like, an incredibly encouraging step. That's something that will only continue to grow. I mean, the radio show that I do with Ron Kruck every week, there has not been a single week of the show that we've done that we haven't had either a former champion, a top level coach, or a UFC Hall of Famer. You know, like every single week, we have had some of it's a turnkey operation. If any other network decides to pick that show up, we can go in and we're, like I say, we run on a broadcast format. So we have segments, we have everything that's all planned out to, if ESPN or Fox Sports or whoever out there wanted to come and pick and pluck this show, they can do it immediately.
Mhm.
The only thing that would change would be the station sponsors in those breaks. Everything else, as far as the content goes, follows a broadcast schedule that's basically, that is exactly what every other show out there does. And then, like I say, with the stuff that Ron and I put out, like, I know that's only a matter of time before that show continues to grow. I mean, shit, dude, I grew up watching Ron Kruck on TV. Like,
Mhm.
so for me, sometimes sitting there, like, I'm sharing the headset with you right now, like we're like bantering back and forth about this. Like, dude, I was a young kid watching Inside MMA with you across the desk from Boss Rutan, and like now, like I gotta pinch myself because I'm talking to you here, and we got Boss on the phone, or you know, we got Uriah Faber or whoever else that were like just these iconic figures that I always have had, you know, that are like on the pedestal of the sport. But then once you start running in those circles, you're no longer like, you can't be a fan anymore though either. So I
Yeah.
guess maybe like that's where some of my approach has shifted and changed, and I've been able to grow. It's not that I'm happy to be here. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm always grateful, always have a high level of gratitude,
Mhm.
but I know that in a large sense, I've earned a seat at the table.
Yeah.
Like I've put in, you know, hours upon hours of work within this field, you know, and that's years worth of relationship building. that's the cornerstone of it all. If I don't have the relationships with the people that I have, then none of these opportunities would ever come to fruition. I don't know, kind of long-winded and rant on that one, but yeah.
No, I mean, but like you said it though, it's like it just goes back to like what I said originally before is that work ethic, man. Like you said, you earned your seat at the table, and now you're talking to let's say like the first fight you ever watched, Matt Hughes, I'm blanking on his name. I'm sorry right now,
Frank
but
Trigg.
yeah, and it's like one of those things. It's like it's like life. It's weird. It's like it has a weird way of coming, coming back full circle, and then like you said, it's like the fact that you've been putting in that hard work and you got a chance to interview him and then dude, it's just so cool. So it's like it's something that I want to accomplish one day, and hopefully we can be doing stuff like back and forth together. I'd love to get a little rolling too. I'll
Oh
probably
yeah.
get dusted up, but it's all right. You're training with killers over there. But
Oh yeah.
speaking of rolling though,
Oh bro, it's a humbling experience.
oh god, dude, it really is. I remember the first time I've ever rolled, and I was like I said earlier, it's like getting hit by a truck. You're just like, what the hell was that? Like it's like I never knew another man can just manhandle another man just like that. And it's one of those things. It's awesome too. It's like humiliating, but at the same time, it's like a drug. Like you want to keep coming back for more. You want to keep getting better. And what you said about jujitsu, it's the ultimate game of chess. And like for me, that's why I love it as well. And then that's another reason why I love mixed martial arts as well, because like you're not. I mean, it's grappling, but you also have to take into account strikes. You know what I mean? Whether it be from a
Yep.
boxing, Muay Thai, kickboxing, it's. I can only imagine, like the overload that some of these fighters like in their brain and goes in there. So it's so cool. And but speaking of fights, my man, you already knew this. I was gonna ask you this on this podcast. You got the Neil Magny and Michael Chiesa fight on Wednesday, and then you got the UFC 257 Dustin Poirier, Conor McGregor, the rematch. So I want to get your thoughts on both of those fights. And yeah, let's just start with the Neil Magny and Michael Chiesa fight, which it sucks. It could have been the Edwards and Chimaev card, but hey, from what I'm seeing, we're rumored to get that hopefully in March. So hopefully it's not another Ferguson and Habib situation that we never get it. But yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I'm pumped for Neil, man. I had
yeah,
Neil on. We had Neil on the radio show the week before last, and
mm,
he's a Colorado dude, so I've got a lot of love for Neil. I know Neil personally, like he's a good dude, and I think that he's really kind of came into his own, especially I mean, he obviously he had his lesson with Pons, but ever since that point, he has looked like a completely different fighter. Like I mean, Neil has always been a very good fighter.
mm,
I mean, you don't win 5 fights within a calendar year and have some of the accolades and achievements that he does without being a very high level and talented fighter. But the way that he's looked over the course of the last year and in his last couple of performances against Lee and against Robbie, he's a serious threat. Like he's the boogeyman of that division right now, and I think that it's kind of disrespectful where his rank is in the division, being that he isn't higher. And I think that it's only in part because you have a lot of right now currently. There's a lot of showmen in the 170-pound division.
yeah,
There's a lot of guys who do a lot of talking, and there's a lot of boisterous personalities that maybe help escalate where they sit within those the people who come up with those rankings. And Neil doesn't. Neil is he's a very humble, down to earth, genuine guy who doesn't play a whole lot of the shit talking game, but he's just as game gets as a fighter. And he was the one who, prior to anybody else, or when Hamza was saying, "Hey, I want
yeah,
to fight somebody who's ranked. I want to fight," Neil was saying the entire time, "I will fight you. Like I don't care how good you think you are. I don't like I'm you. You want somebody who's ranked. You want somebody who's ahead of you in the division. I'll do it. Let's fight. Let's go."
mm,
And obviously that fight never got made, but that just goes to show you how game Neil Magny is.
mm,
And so Michael Chiesa at the same time, Michael Chiesa has looked great in his last couple of fights. That's a guy who has a squeeze that is unreal. You see in some of his fights back at 55, he had a couple of, like against Beneil Dariush. That fight against Dariush, he didn't even have the choke completely sunk. Like if you go back and if you watch that tight,
mm,
he was across the face, and it was more of a crank. And just a guy who is as solid as Dariush is all the way around, you know that crank and that squeeze had to be just so freaking tight that his face just felt like it was going to explode
Mhm.
from the way that he had that rear naked crank in. So depending on where the fight goes, I think obviously Neil is best suited if he uses his length, he uses his distance, he uses his quickness to keep this standing up and use a lot of volume essentially to try to put a pace on Chiesa because he is going to be a lot longer than him once they get in there. If he stays at range, I think that works much more favorably than if they start to really kind of go to the ground and start to play the grappling game.
Mhm.
Then if we're talking, moving along to the Connor fight, like first and foremost, how about that arrival today?
Oh
Like
my god, dude! In a yacht, dude.
it was like a damn sultan.
It's insane. I mean, nobody knows. I mean, nobody knows how to make a better entrance than Conor McGregor. And also, I want to talk about this, right? I saw that other video of him pulling up to the hotel. Who the hell was that employee just yelling the whole time? I don't know what the hell he's saying, but he's like, McGregor, McGregor. Dude, he was with his kid. Like, chillax a little bit. I don't know. I just wanted to get that off my chest. For me, I found it annoying. But like you said, the fact that he came in on a yacht, epic. Absolute G.
Yeah, then he gets out of the car. I mean, suicide doors on the car. Everything comes around. I mean, he's shirtless. He's got like the Bikram yoga, like I'm here to fuck sort of pants on. And he goes and he grabs Junior out of the side of the car and just goes walking in, essentially like Billy Strutton to the W Hotel.
Yeah.
Like that is an entrance of the entrances. Like I mean they do those for a lot of different fighters of showing them pulling up or arrive into the arena, but
Mhm.
it's just crazy like how many people do most out there actually like really pay attention to them showing up or arriving, or what is the click-through rate on that actual video or when that notification gets put out versus when it's Conor McGregor.
Yeah.
And especially at this point, I mean that I don't know, man. And I've never been a big Connor Dick writer. I've always been a lot more objective about him. Like, I've always said more along the lines of, hey man, he's good, but he's not that good, like
Mhm.
like he's got holes that he could be beat, like his cardio, like basically the way that both Nate and Habib were able to beat him, I've always kind of pointed out. But
Mhm.
looking back at it in retrospect, like overall, like Connor still is like he's one of the greatest to ever fight. I don't think that he deserves to be called the greatest by any means. You have to
Mhm.
have title defenses to be able to do that.
Yeah.
But when that man is on his game and when he's motivated, he's a tough out for anybody. And I really do believe that, as much as I've shit on his ground game in the past, rewatching some of those matchups, his ground game is a lot more overrated, or excuse me, is a lot more underrated than most people will give him credit for. And I think
100%.
it's just kind of like he made the comment that time of, I didn't even grapple. John gave me a brown belt without even having to grapple. I'm, just going on his own little rant there.
Yeah.
And when you look at some of the sequences in like the Habib fight, he did have a little bit of success at times stuffing the takedown, and
Yeah.
wasn't exact. It wasn't like when Habib got a hold of Barbosa. Like if we're talking, like a grappler versus a striker.
Mhm.
It was just there was differences in it. There was differences, like you could see technical differences in what he was doing to defend some of those shots in the Cowboy fight, to know that, okay, I have enough presence right now to know that he is going to level change to where I'm going to use my hip as a weapon.
Yeah.
Like that's just insane fight IQ. They get tied up and, okay, well, I'm going to know, or I'm not going to let Cowboy get off. I'm not going to let Cowboy get going. So we get tied up. I don't have enough space to throw even short range tools like elbows. So I'm going to throw my shoulder socket right into your face.
Man.
Dude,
Mhm.
like how many people have the fight IQ to be able to do that? People will look back and always say like, oh, well, then you got lucky with the Aldo fight. I don't believe that. I believe that was calculated.
Yeah.
You can see in the videos in the back before the fight where he was going through basically a walkthrough and progression of that. If you want to talk calculated, that's a dude who's calculated.
Yeah.
Like that's someone who thinks things like through so many different levels. Like I say, he's kind of like LeBron for me. Like I've shit on him in so many different ways, but it's like, God, this dude is just so fucking
It's
good.
like after a while, you just have to give in. You know what? Screw it, man. I'm gonna give him the credit that he deserves. But no, dude, and that's another thing, dude. Like I really agreed with you with his when it comes to his grappling, dude. I feel like a lot of people are just so quick to shit on his grappling, and and they always go back to the Habib fight or the Nate Diaz fight when he got choked out in the first fight. But like you said, it's like someone that actually trains and can actually see like the little details of him. Like I think Daniel Cormier did a really good episode. What was it on Detail on ESPN Plus when it came to him holding on him having like his hook as he's going down, like when he's going for that single leg and all that thing. So I like you said, it's like the fact that that people shit on his grappling, I feel like people should start giving a little bit more credit. But I'm guessing, so from what it sounds like, I think you're picking Conor McGregor for this one, for the rematch, or I don't know.
I mean, I'm leaning Connor, honestly,
uh
but I have to see, like, it's his first time cutting down to 55
yeah.
in a long time too. So
Mm.
I personally, I don't like to make my picks until after weigh-ins.
Okay, I feel.
And that's simply because, like, bro, I've just been around it for too long to know, like, how that rehydration process goes and
Mm.
how you recover in that next basically like 18 hours after you step off the scale plays a major factor and a major role in how you ultimately perform once it comes fight night, or
Mm.
once it comes time to shine under the lights. And we still have to know that, hey, can he actually get there? For one, I don't think that he'll have a problem in doing it,
Mm.
but you never know. Like,
Yeah.
there could be some complications that come about from it. How do we know that there isn't from either side? There might be some stomach issues that come about from it. Who fucking knows?
Yeah.
There's a lot of variables that still come into play that we still have yet to see. Dustin looks dialed in,
Mm.
and I'm a huge Dustin Poirier fan, but let me at least offer you this.
Mm. Hitting me with the chill
The
sun in line
best,
over here. There
yes,
you
sir.
go.
The best Dustin cannot beat the best Connor,
Mm.
in my opinion.
Mm.
If the Connor that showed up that was, just not sharp, not on his game the way that he did against, say, like Habib,
Mm.
which again, no excuse not to be on top of your game. Like, I'm not making any sort of excuses for him by any means, but
Mm.
if that sort of effort or mental approach is taken, then Dustin has a chance. Dustin has a good chance, especially if Dustin can close the gap on the distance and not play the range game and let Connor unload with those devastating left hands. I mean, when he shoots that two, it's like a fucking piston.
Mm.
And there's very few people who can go into something without setting up those big bombs and power shots, without having some sort of blend with maybe even it's non-committal shots, just to draw some intel and to pull you away and open up the hole.
Mm.
Very few people can throw that kill shot as just a one shot, one kill, what's the deal sort of situation. Very few people can. Conor McGregor is one of those guys. What scares me about that fight, or what scares me stylistically between the two of them, is Dustin has a propensity to go to war. Because Dustin has a propensity to go to war, that means that he's also susceptible to taking damage.
Mm.
And you just flat out, I don't believe anybody out there in the native, like the true 155-pound class, aside from obviously from Nate. Exclude Nate from that. I just don't think that if you want to stand there and if you want to go blow for blow, I don't think that there's anybody that can take repeated left hands from Connor.
Mm.
And that's just saying, like, if you're going to stand right in front of him and let him unload, let him control the pace, let him control the distance, you're not chopping away at that lead leg. Because, I mean, yeah, Dustin will throw kicks, but Dustin is not known for being menacing with those low kicks.
Yeah.
Whereas, I don't know. Like, I keep on, I've always felt like that's a recipe to beat Connor. Like, that's why I think that I've always maintained that Justin Gaethje is a horrible matchup stylistically for Connor, because if he can chop away at that lead leg, and you can't drive through it with that back, with your power side, that's significantly reducing that damage effect. But I don't know. Like, I don't know that Dustin has the ability to withstand the bombs from Conor.
Mm.
And I think that Conor doesn't like to have a filling out period either. Like, that's something that we've also come to know from watching his performances through the years is he doesn't need to fill out.
Mm.
He will go for broke right away from the gate. I mean, when you want to talk, like the fucking like racehorses or whatever, like, yeah, you're gonna have you'll have your whatever bullshit horses that people go on the local track, and you have your drunk degenerates there. But then you have those motherfuckers who are running in the Kentucky Derby, those thoroughbreds.
Mm.
That's what Conor is. Conor is a thoroughbred. He doesn't need time to wait. That dude will come out of the gates hot. And we've seen it time and time again. How many knockouts does Conor McGregor have underneath the 2 and 3 minute mark of that first round? Much less knockouts that have came at 90 seconds and below, 60 seconds and below.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, definitely a high amount. And dude, I can't wait for that fight. But you know what? There's another fight that I just forgot to ask you about, that co-main event. You know what I mean? The UFC debut of Michael Chandler and Dan Hooker. And the thing that makes me laugh about Michael Chandler, especially after watching the DC and Helwani show, I don't know if you're into pro wrestling, but the fact that they're calling him the Ric Flair, the Ric Flair of the UFC right now, I think it's just perfect, dude. So what do you think, dude? Do you think Michael Chandler gets it done? You know, he puts on an impressive showing, or do you think Dan Hooker? And the thing is, Dan Hooker almost won that last fight against Dustin Poirier. He almost finished him in the second round. So I don't know. What's your opinion on that?
I think that it's a bad matchup for Chandler, honestly. I think that Hooker's a tough dude.
Mm.
I think that Michael Chandler, I've had a lot of questions about Chandler just in general. Like, I mean, I think that he's good,
Mm-hmm.
but we obviously we don't know, how good in the sense of the UFC.
Mm-hmm.
But my big question has always came with Chandler, and I also find it funny that, or not funny, but it's from where I sit, or with the knowledge base that I have, or knowing who and what I do in the sport. It's
Mm-hmm.
funny that his first fight wasn't here stateside, because it's going to be more lax on the testing end.
Mm-hmm.
I've always had questions about Michael Chandler in relation to PEDs.
Mm-hmm.
Always have. And especially because straight up in Bellator, like, it's not tested for.
Yeah.
Like, there's a reason why guys look like the way that they do in some, or you have guys who were getting their face smashed in the UFC, then they go over to Bellator and they're world beaters.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, there's a reason why that shit happens. And for someone like Michael Chandler, I mean, it's one of those, like, sometimes it's if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, might be a duck.
Mm-hmm.
And I've grown up around gyms. I've been around gyms. I know guys who have trained with some of these guys who have eventually at some point gotten popped. And like they just have all said, like, I'm in good shape. Like, I'm a fucking world class athlete, and I could barely finish those workouts. Like, it wasn't even like talking how did we stack up working out against? No, I could barely finish that shit.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm in this good a shape and he was just roaring through it, sometimes the smell test is definitely a little bit funky, if you feel what I'm saying.
No, you're not.
So I've always had that question about Michael Chandler, and I thought that, oh well, they played off the whole, like, oh, he didn't want to turn around and cut weight again after the alternate for Khabib and Gaethje to fight Tony. But also Chandler talks about always being in great conditioning, and talks about his wrestling background. Well, bro, you used to make weight every single week.
Mm-hmm.
And you also, in turn, you didn't have to wear the damage of the fight. You didn't take any sort of damage. You were able to rehydrate right away, and you were able to bounce right back. So realistically, you should have had no problem cutting that weight. But that's just me with my tinfoil hat on, in that I feel like there was a reason why his first fight wasn't stateside in Nevada.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that a good amount of that has to deal with the drug testing situation. I think that there's been guys that fight and train in different parts of the world that have gotten away with cycling left and right during the pandemic, especially with all the travel sanctions.
Mhm.
That's something that I think is definitely a factor for some of these guys. You know, you see it from some of the dudes who show up on these cards who, like, bro, you did not fucking look like that. Like, just even a few weeks ago,
Yeah.
and now like you look like Adonis.
Yeah.
Like just little things, you know what I'm saying? Or on the flip side, you'll see a guy who fought 6 weeks ago and looked like he was carved out of marble, and then just a few weeks after that, looks like someone just took a fucking needle to him. And it's like, you don't, if it was all natural, like it stays, like you hold on to that. There's a little bit more retention.
No, yeah, definitely.
But so yeah, like, I mean, I don't know, maybe it's just my background, maybe it's that I'm so entrenched into all of this, and I've grown up in gyms my whole life, like
Yeah.
like around like bodybuilding community and whatnot. So I just I know what gear bodies look like more times than not, and a lot of times if it looks like a duck, it's usually there's a little bit of something there. So I think that it being a 3-round fight, though, to get back to your question, I think that it being a 3-round fight definitely helps Chandler in that way. I think that if it were to go 5, that it would be a tough situation for him, especially because you have to think he has to punch up the entire time.
Yeah.
Because Hooker is so long. So I don't know, man. Like I've grown on Dan Hooker a lot. Like at first I was skeptical with Hooker until the Poirier fight.
Yeah.
And then when he was able to stand there, and when he was able to really show, what he was made of against Dustin, that's when I became a much bigger believer in Dan Hooker. And I don't know, like that's just a very, very tough guy to make your debut against if you're Michael Chandler and you're 36 years old.
Yeah, and like it's crazy to think about too that I mean I forget that he trains at a city kickboxing, trains with absolute savages like Israel Adesanya and Alexander Volkanovski. So I don't know, man. If I had to make my pick, I'll be honest, I'm going with Dan Hooker. I really do. I really do. I think he finishes it. I think he finishes Michael Chandler, as a matter of fact. So we'll either look back at this and then people are gonna be like, "Wow, Gio's such a fucking dumbass," or he's a genius. But who knows? Like you said in the Dapper Media podcast, shoot a shoot, and I'm shooting my shot right now. So, yeah, Kurt. So, hey, I think I've taken. What was that? Hello.
I said no, yeah, absolutely.
Oh no, yeah,
Did I lose you?
Yeah, it was like lagging. So, Kurtz, I know I've probably taken more of your time than what we were expecting. So, before we go, do you want to plug in your social medias, plug in your shows, and go from there?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can follow me at Comments from the Peanut Gallery on Instagram, at Peanut Podcast on Twitter. There's also the show page for the MMA Plug presented by DenverSportsBetting.com on Mile High Radio, which can be followed at the MMA Plug 303 on Instagram. You could also follow DenverSportsBetting.com. I'm a partner with those guys. There is this week, as far as the Comments from the Peanut Gallery podcast, the lineup is Daniel Carey from Bellator, Kevin Kroom of the UFC, and then Josh Fremd of the LFA. Josh Fremd, I'm so excited for what Josh is going to be bringing to the octagon on January 29th. He was the LFA 2020 Fighter of the Year. I mean, this kid has such a bright potential. His future is so bright. He has all the things that you want in that future superstar if you're that next level. Is he a big, fast, explosive, athletic, light heavyweight or middleweight, whichever way you want him to go? 100%. Does he speak well? Yes. Is he intelligent? Absolutely. Is he someone who is well versed in their skill set as well? Yes. He's great on the ground. He's also an explosive and devastating striker. If you saw his 2 knockouts from LFA last year, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So be on the lookout for Josh Fremd and what he's going to do in there for his first main event with LFA on January 29th.
My man. So, Kurtz, Once again, I really appreciate the time. And then, I mean, hopefully you can stick around after we finish the interview. I gotta have to ask you a couple questions. But as for everybody
Oh yeah.
watching, thank you for watching, and make sure to go follow Comments from the Peanut Gallery. Follow my man Kurtz. My man Kurt's gonna be the future of this game. So, peace.